If you've tuned in to catch the short form of this video, the summary is simply this. There's evidence to suggest that Apple's going to skip the M2X and go straight to the M3X, and that's possibly going to be released in the first half of 2022 in their Apple Desktop Pro products, and then maybe much later in their Pro laptop products. So if you want more information on that, stick around and I'll go into why. For at least the last 8 years, Apple have, like clockwork, released a new A series CPU in their iPhone every 12 months, almost exactly every 12 months. But a couple of times they haven't been afraid to skip the X variant of the A processor. For example, they didn't have an A7X or an A11X if they felt they didn't need it. With each generation of Apple Silicon, so each year cycle, they've usually improved the process, almost always improved the process size. So gone from, for example, from 7 nanometer to 5 nanometer. And also they've improved the cores, the performance and efficiency cores have had an update every single year. The M1X processor is expected to be released in Apple's Pro series of laptops. And this is probably going to happen sometime in October or November this year. Initially, they were expected to be released in April, but due to supply shortages, this has been deferred. Around that same time frame, in October, November, Apple's expected to release the iPhone 13 or iPhone 12s, and it's expected to have the A15 CPU in it, which will have a new set of CPU cores and be built on TSMC's N5P process. The new MacBook Air is expected to be released in February 2022. It'll have colourful chassis, and it'll be built on a processor that is very similar to, or the big brother to, the X variant of the A15, the same processor that'll come in the new iPhone 12s or iPhone 13, depending on what Apple call it. So the theoretical M3 processor will come with newer generation cores, the ones that you would expect to be in Apple's A16 processor, or the processor that you would expect to be in Apple's iPhone 14 or possibly 13 if they go with the 12s. And this will have even newer cores and be built on TSMC's 3 nanometer process. Development for that 3 nanometer process starts in December of this year, which means that Apple will have already had those cores coming in the 2022 iPhone. The updated cores, the performance and the efficiency cores, are already ready for production at that time. Now, the problem with an M2X is its time frame for existence is too tight. If Apple released an M2X product sometime in the first half of 2022, it's conceivable that they could actually have an M3X product available in the second half of 2022, leaving it only like a 6 months, 9 months time window for a viable product. And Apple's the kind of company that will happily skip a generation if it needs to, as it did with the A7 and A7X, I should say, and the A11X. And I think they're going to do that with the M2X as well and go straight to the M3X. So the most important reason, apart from the fact that I expect the time frame to be poor for an M2X, the reason why Apple may be able to rush an M3X into production sooner than you might expect is because of how the 3 nanometer development process will happen for Apple. Production of 30,000 wafers per month is expected to start in December. Apple need to use that production or that process to build enough CPU dies for their iPhone lineup that'll be coming up in October, November of 2022. And you can reasonably expect that they'll produce something like nearly 100 million dies CPUs for their iPhone. To do that, if you run the calculations through a die calculator and make an estimate of what a reasonable yield or defect yield for a wafer is and how many dies you can expect to get off a single wafer is run, and then times it by 30,000 wafers a month, you can expect to say that producing 100 million dies for iPhones, given a roughly 80 millimeter squared die for a phone, which is roughly what it is right now, you can expect that Apple can produce enough, 100 million dies in something like 6 months production, maybe 5 months even, for all they need. And that actually leaves quite 4 months of productivity between, say, December and March that Apple could be using to produce the M3X processor in the same process. Now, of course, they're going to run the two processors in parallel, and they'll produce more of one than the other, so they may phase in and out production depending on demand, but they can actually fit it in. So if they can produce enough CPUs in the first, say, quarter of the year, let's say the first quarter of the year, that's enough time to build the M3X processor and stick it in a relatively low volume product like Apple's desktop pro computers. They sell them in low volumes. When you run the die calculator across a large die, I'll say 220 millimeters squared, that the M3X is likely to be, even if you give it a relatively low die yield or high defect rate, or a low yield, say 60%, you're still getting in the millions of processors produced, which would be ample for Apple's needs at that part of the year if they were only going to put them in the Pro products. And the beauty of the Pro products is they have enormous yield. The average selling price for a Mac Pro desktop is somewhere in the range of $5,000 or more, even for the minimum spec version. And a product like an M3X will have the performance that will blow the competition away, so they can expect to have relatively high demand for it. So there you have it. The reasoning I have for expecting no M2X product to exist and for the M3X to come in very early in the first half of 2022 is that there's demand for it. Apple needs to migrate their whole product line across in the Pro range. That's the only part of the product range that's really not even been flagged for where it'll move across to the Apple Silicon series. And Apple has promised that they will move all of their products across basically by December 2022 or a little earlier, and it's going to give them a highly advanced product in the marketplace, very competitive compared to the competition. It'll give them enormous yield, so in terms of profit per die or profit per millimeter squared of their process, it's one of the highest yielding products that they have. So there's an incentive for them to push it forward as far as they can. And if there's one thing Apple likes to do, it's make money. So moving back to the summary, I don't think that there'll be an M2X product. They'll go straight to the M3X. I expect that they'll release commercial products in the first half of 2022, and it'll most likely be in the Desktop Pro line. And then maybe 6 months later, after the iPhones come out and production is available in the 3nm process, the TSMC 3nm process, and the rest of the product range, like laptops and so forth, will come across then. All right, thanks for watching. If you disagree with me, or you agree, or you have more information that you think will alter my decision, please put something in the comments. Thanks for watching.